Does it feel like culture is constantly contradicting the biblical truths that you're trying to teach your children? Are you struggling to compete with screens, social media, and entertainment for your child's attention and ultimately their heart? Would you like to build the kind of relationship where your child wants to listen, learn, and receive wisdom from you? Well, then we're glad you're joining us for today's episode. I'm your host, Alex Cody, and welcome to my mom's podcast, Parenting with Ginger Hubbard. Ginger is the best-selling author of Don't Make Me Count to 3, Wise Words for Moms, and I Can't Believe You Just Said That. She speaks at moms conferences, homeschool conventions, and Christian schools across the country. You can check out her parenting resources, find out when she's speaking in or near your area, or explore the possibility of having Ginger lead a moms conference at your church or school at gingerhubbard.com. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help support our ministry, one way you can do that is by purchasing Ginger's resources directly from her website instead of other online retailers. And stay tuned until the end of this episode to receive a discount code on your purchase at gingerhubbard.com. Thank you for your support, listeners. This enables us to further our mission to help parents reach the hearts of their children for the glory of God. I want to take a moment to tell you about CTC Math, a flexible and convenient solution for kids' math learning needs. See, when I was a student, algebra was way too easy and geometry felt impossible, and there wasn't a way to customize learning to challenge me where I excelled or help where I struggled. So that's why CTC Math is perfect for busy families and homeschoolers because it allows kids to learn at their own pace and in their own space and on their own terms. Your kids can learn anytime and anywhere, whether it's at home or on a car ride. And the best part is parents can easily track their child's progress with detailed reports. And it's not just a list of grades. There are real insights into how your kids are learning, what they're excelling in, and where they could use more support. So head on over to ctcmath.com, sign up for a free trial, and discover the joy of flexible, stress-free learning with CTC Math. That's ctcmath.com. Well, what's up, Mom? And hello, listeners. We have said many times on this podcast that parenting is discipleship, and our kids are learning from us all of the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Our children are listening to what we say, but they're also watching how we live. So, how do we disciple our kids with all of the distractions in today's world? That's why I'm so glad we have today's guest joining us to share about why the Bible calls us to train up our children in the way they should go and how we can teach biblical concepts that culture wants to contradict. So, Mom, why don't you introduce us to Israel and tell us a little bit more about him?
I would love to. Israel Wayne has a passion for defending the Christian faith and promoting a biblical worldview. He's the author of several books, including Questions God Asks, Pitching a Fit, Overcoming Angry and Stressed Out Parenting, Education, Does God Have an Opinion? And Answers for Homeschooling, the top 25 questions critics ask. He is also the site editor for ChristianWorldview.net and the founder of Family Renewal. Israel travels the nation speaking on family, homeschooling, apologetics, spiritual awakening, discipleship, and cultural issues. He and his wife, Brooke, are both homeschooled graduates and have been married since 1999. They have 11 homeschooled children. And just on a personal note, I have had the privilege of speaking at dozens of conferences with Israel. And so I've heard him speak, I've read his books, and I just have to say that I love his heart for Jesus, for family, and his passion to encourage parents to disciple their children well. Israel is for sure one of the most sought after speakers at parenting and homeschool conferences, and rightly so. His messages are always packed with biblical and practical wisdom for raising the next generation for the glory of God. And I do like to tease Israel that on top of all that wisdom, it certainly doesn't hurt that he has the coolest name of anyone I know. Israel Wayne. His name sounds like a biblical cowboy. I mean, who wouldn't want to hear him speak? So, Israel, it is just so great to have you joining us today, my friend. Welcome to the podcast.
This is a great honor for me to be able to be on your podcast. I'm a big fan of you and your work, and I know that we share in common a desire to help parents learn how to navigate this difficult parenting world and to disciple their children. So, this is a great privilege for me to be with you.
Yes, we absolutely have that in common. And Israel, one thing that you talk a lot about is gospel centered parenting, which I very much appreciate. And I think that's what any parent who truly loves the Lord desires. But, moms and dads may not always know what it actually looks like in the day to day moments of correcting and discipling and encouraging and guiding their children. So, can you describe what that looks like just in the day to day?
Yeah. Well, I grew up being churched in the 1980s and 90s and grew up in the kind of evangelical church culture of that time. And there was a lot of emphasis on things that looked good on the surface, things like teaching your children good behavior, good manners, how to have good character, how to act good, how to be polite, that kind of thing. But I realized that a lot of that was very surface level. And one of the things that was a first indication to me that this could be problematic was when I was talking to a Christian organization in the mid 90s. They were telling me how they had just gotten a Christian character curriculum that they published into the public school system. And I asked them, how did you manage to get a Christian character curriculum into the public schools? And they said, oh, it was very easy. We just had to take out any reference to Jesus, God, or the Bible. And I thought to myself, well, that's so strange. And I said this to them. I said, well, at what point then, what's your reference point for morality and for character, right? Because what is character actually? Character is simply living out and acting sort of the fruits of the spirit, if you will, right? But we're disconnecting these behaviors from the source of the behaviors, which is the nature and character of God Himself. And so when you cut off God as the moral lawgiver, you don't have a universal basis for moral law anymore, and therefore no standard for right or wrong behavior. You're just teaching children to be good for no reason. And so that was a tip off to me that some of this external emphasis that parents were putting so much attention on might actually be detrimental. And I learned this myself as a young parent because I found that in correcting my children, I would often speak to their behavior, but not to the heart behind the behavior. So, I use an illustration sometimes of, let's say that my 6 year old and 4 year old are building, playing in the living room. The 4 year old's building a Lego tower, and the 6 year old comes in and sort of, walks past and accidentally drags their foot and knocks the 4 year old's Lego tower down to, watch them cry, right? Well, I've this happened once, and I watched it, and I saw this thought go into my 6 year old's head before he did it, and I knew it was intentional, and so I remember the way I responded as a young dad was I said, that wasn't nice. You're not being kind to your sibling. You need to apologize. You need to tell them what you did was wrong. You stop being mean to your sibling, play nicely, be nice, whatever. And it was later, as I was thinking about it, that I thought, what message did I send in that moment? Because I felt like I was doing the right thing because I corrected it, right? I didn't just let it go. But ultimately, what I was telling them was stop doing bad things and start doing good things. And I think sometimes that really is the message that we send to our children, like the macro overall message over 18 years of parenting is stop doing bad things, start doing good things. And what I believe now as an older parent is that our child's great need is not to be taught how to stop doing bad things and start doing good things. Their first need is to kind of see that they're not innately morally good, and that the solution to their not being good is not them. The solution to them not being good is Jesus. And I just wonder, how much do we actually keep the gospel front and center with our children? How often, even in the correcting, do we use those opportunities when they have demonstrated that they're not good? Do we just present to them like you're the solution to your own problem? Just pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, try harder, do better, stop doing bad things, start doing good things. Well, what is that? That's moralism. And I really think that as much as it sounds good and it sounds right, I don't think moralism is a subset of Christianity. I think it's actually a false gospel. I think it's actually an enemy of the gospel. And so our children's great need is to see that they need Jesus. And then when this regeneration, this change happens on the inside of them, where the Holy Spirit changes them and the old person becomes new, and there's that rebirth that Jesus talks about in John 3, it's a game changer because now all of a sudden we're not just focusing on external behavior, but now all of a sudden their motives have changed. And because they have a relationship with Christ, they actually want to do the right things for the right reasons. So, long-winded answer, but I really think the answer to and the solution to the problem of moralism is that we need to present the gospel to our children. And every time there's a sin issue in our family, it gives us a wonderful opportunity to bring the gospel to that situation.
Mm.
That is also so good.
Mhm.
Um, One thing I feel like so many parents long for is not just outward obedience, but they actually want a relationship where their child actually wants to listen and learn and receive wisdom from them. So, in your opinion, how can a parent gain influence in their child's life so that their child actually desires to learn from them?
Well, there's two factors that are the most important when it comes to influence. The first one is time. And I don't just mean quality time, I mean quantity time. And the second one is affirmation and encouragement. And so ultimately, whoever spends the most time with your children and simultaneously encourages and affirms them the most, not for what they do, but for who they are, that person will end up having the most influence in a child's life. And for most parents, that will never be them because 95% of all Christian parents send their children away from them to some sort of institutional school. And I'm not trying to slam schools per se. What I'm trying to say is if time is the most significant force for influence, which it is, you're giving away 7.5 hours of every day to somebody that's not you. And so by necessity, those other people are going to become more influential than you are. And then when the kids come home from school, sociologists tell us that those same kids spend 7.5 hours in screens and multimedia after school. So that's 15 hours of their 16-hour waking day. And the US Department of Labor Statistics says the average mom spends 1 hour a day interacting with her children. The average dad now is 29 minutes. And so if you put that on a scale of 15 hours of influence from schools and screens, 1 hour for mom, 29 minutes for dad, that will never balance out. So, by definition, most parents will never end up being the most influential persons in their child's life. And we see this come back to roost. And I hear it all the time. Ginger, you hear it all the time when we speak to parents at conferences. And they come and say, I have this 16-year-old. He doesn't respect me. He won't listen to me. He's bigger than me. He's, 6'2" and laying on the couch at 185 pounds. And I tell him, hey, it's Tuesday night. Will you take the trash out? And he says, Mom, do it yourself. What do I do? How do I fix this? Well, the hard part is at that stage, at that age, mom, there's probably not a lot that you can do. But the problem is we didn't build in the necessary inputs to be able to have that influence later. And so for especially for those younger parents, if you want influence, you have to spend more time with your child than anybody else. And simultaneously, you have to encourage and affirm them the most of anybody in their life. And if you're doing both of those things, intrinsically, you're going to have the most influence.
Mhm.
Mm.
And that is exactly why we made the decision to homeschool our kids because I wanted to be the greatest influence in their lives. Not that there are, I mean, there's some teachers that are great influences
Oh,
on kids,
absolutely.
but there's some teachers that are not. And so, it's a
Well, and also
gamble.
it's just not you, right?
Right.
Mhm.
It's
So that's
just
one of
not
the
you.
things. Like, I'm not trying to slam somebody else. It's kind of my point. Like, I'm not
Of
trying to say, oh,
course.
these are terrible, horrible people, these teachers, but they're not me. And
Mhm.
Right.
so the one thing that they can't give my child is me. And so the
Mhm.
question is, do I want to be the most influential person in my child's life?
Right.
It's not like, oh, I think that Sally Joe down the street's a bad person. That's not even the
Right.
equation. Although maybe
Right.
maybe sometimes the teachers are bad influence, as you said. But even if they're wonderful, great people, they're
Mhm.
not me. And so then the
Mhm.
question
Right.
is, do I want to be the most influential person or do I want Sally Joe to be the most influential person? And for me
Mhm.
as a parent, well, yeah, I want that to be my wife and I. We want to
Mhm.
be the most influential. And one more thing
Right.
about that, there are people who homeschool and
Mhm.
still have their kids on screens for 7.5 hours a day, which I'm
Mhm.
probably
Right.
jumping ahead to something we'll talk about later. But
Still though.
but but still though, They can end up not being the most influential person because the child is there physically present in the home, but they're
Mhm.
not actually engaging their child in a positive way. Or maybe they're so negative in their interaction with their child that they're undermining the time. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? Like they bought back
Yes.
time, which is good, but then they undermine all that potential for influence by just having a negative attitude to their children. And then that ruins the whole thing as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's about spending that time with our kids and being the primary influence in their life. And you're right, Israel. I mean, there are people that love children and want to have a positive influence in their life, but they're not us. And the bottom line is that no one loves our children more than we do except the Lord. So, yeah, so we have their best interest at heart. And, I think that we would all probably agree. You talked about, the teenager, the 16-year-old that comes and says, take out the trash yourself. I think that we would all agree that, I don't know if this is true with all homeschoolers, but that the teen years, they can be, whether homeschooled or not, some of the most difficult years for parents to navigate because the relationship begins to shift in new ways. They're getting older. And so there's just, changes in the way we parent. So, what are some of the changes, Israel, that you suggest parents make as they move from raising young children to parenting teens?
Well, when they're raising those toddlers, they really should be parenting more from a position of authority and control. And I don't mean that in a negative sense of like being some mean, overbearing parent, but just logistically, like when a baby is an infant, the parent has 100% control in the life of that infant. Like they can't get up and walk across the room. They can't dress themselves. They can't change their own diaper. They can't go to the refrigerator and get food. They don't have agency. And so the parent makes all the decisions for that child. They have 100% control, but they really don't have influence in the sense that, you can try to give propaganda to your infant and try to convince them to like your favorite sports team or vote for your favorite politician, but they don't even understand your language, right? So you have 100% control and 0% influence, but that transitions over time. And the goal by age 20 is to have 0% control and 100% influence. So there's this transition that takes place. And so you need those factors, those forces of time and affirmation that I look at it like a relationship bank, where we make deposits. In the future, when your children are teenagers and even young adults, sometimes you're going to have to make deposits, or sorry, you're going to have to make withdrawals against that relationship and ask them to do things. And you have to have enough in the account to cover those withdrawals. And so you need deposits of time and affirmation in those early years. And then you can start making some of those withdrawals of influence in the older years. So, just quickly, like I have young adults now. I mean, just so the parents kind of understand where I'm coming from demographically here. Our oldest is 26, our youngest is 5. We have 6 girls, 5 boys. And so we've kind of seen the whole gamut. We have one grandbaby, by the way, too. And so, when with my older sons, let's say they're no longer living at home, one of them is married, they still call and ask me for advice and counsel. And they're not doing that because I have control over their life. They're doing that because I have influence. And so there has to be this transition. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book, Raising Them Up, Parenting for Christians, is how to transition from control, which is not a bad thing in the early years, to influence in the teen years. Because if you're trying to deal with that 16-year-old who's bigger than you with control, that's not going to work. It's not going to go well. And unfortunately, what a lot of parents do is they try to raise the toddler with influence. They want to be their buddy, and
Right.
they don't really have authority, and they don't have proper discipline. But then when they become 15, 16, all of a sudden now it's about authority and control. They've got it inverted, and that doesn't work.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I would say that parents today are raising children in a world where screens and social media, entertainment, and cultural messages are just constantly competing for the attention and the hearts of their children. So, how can parents help their children navigate through the expanding world of digital screen time and cultural influence?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the short answer, which they won't like, and that's that you have to limit.
Woohoo! That's a
That's a very good
great,
answer.
Yeah,
that's a
Yep.
very good
nobody
answer.
likes that. Yeah, so whenever I get to that part in my conference workshops, just big swaths of people get up and leave. Um,
Really?
but they don't, they know it
Yeah.
intrinsically,
Right.
but they don't want
Yeah.
to do it, right? Because they
Right.
know the pushback that they're going to get. And so one thing that I often say is it's a lot easier to not introduce something, particularly in terms of digital media, to never introduce it in the first place
Yep.
than to introduce it and then try to take it away or to dial it
Absolutely.
back significantly. So my wife and I made some radical decisions when we were young parents that I'm not prescribing this for everybody else because we're not the standard for anybody else's family. But one of the things we decided before we were ever married is we would never have a video game console in our house. And I know that people go, oh, that's legalistic and so forth. But we've seen enough of these parents who come and say, look, I'm dealing with video game addicted kids. What do I do? And we just thought, well, if we never introduce it, then we don't have the fight. So what's strange about our children is they don't even miss it because they don't think about it as being a thing because it's just not a part of their life. And so there are certain things that we've done that may be pretty radical, but I've had two young adult sons who have both independently contacted me and said, Dad, thank you so much for not raising us with gaming
Mm.
Mhm.
because all of our friends who are our ages in our 20s, single guys, but even young married guys, are addicted to these games. And we just see how much it impacts their life in a negative way. And like we don't have those, we don't have to go spend 4 hours after work on a video game. We could have real conversations with people and so forth. So in my book, Raising Them Up, I have a chapter in there called Techno Parenting. And here's one of the things that I teach my kids that I've passed on in the book is the concept of us either being predominantly producers or consumers. And so I want my children to not be predominantly consumers. I want them to be producers. So I'm for technology, but I predominantly want to use technology for producing something, adding value to the world, as opposed to simply being an information source or an entertainment source. And so with my teenagers, when they're interested in technology, I say, what do you plan to make, to build, to produce, to manufacture with this technology? And if it's something that is producing and adding value to the world, I want to encourage that. In fact, I might even help put money behind it. But if it's just something that's sheer entertainment, then I'm going to encourage them to shift their focus into something that's more producing than consuming.
If you're struggling with sleep, anxiety, exhaustion, or brain fog, I really want to share something that's helped me. We Heart Nutrition is a faith based company creating high quality supplements for women in every phase of life. I've been taking their magnesium glycinate for sleep and omega 3 for brain fog, and I've been amazed by the difference. Unlike other brands I've tried, these don't upset my stomach and they actually work. I also love that We Heart Nutrition is pro life and donates 10% of every sale to pregnancy centers. You can find the supplements that are right for you at weheartnutrition.com and use code GINGER for 20% off your order. That's weheartnutrition.com, code GINGER. Are you frustrated with the high cost and low return of health insurance? I know I was. After my husband experienced two medical emergencies and we lost our insurance, we were discouraged and concerned when we couldn't find affordable health care. That's when we turned to trusted friends who told us about Redeem Health Share through Samaritan Ministries. We heard testimony after testimony of how Redeem serves its members with compassion, stays aligned with biblical values, and focuses on ministry, not profit. Members care for one another, both spiritually and financially, during seasons when support is needed most. Y'all, this is what true Christian community is all about. Find an affordable solution that's right for your family by clicking on the link in the show notes or go to redeemhealthshare.org.
I'd love to ask a follow-up question on that, and if you're comfortable answering it, did y'all have specific regulations for your teenagers and everything when it came to visiting friends who had video games?
Yeah. So, in terms of visiting friends who have electronics, our family, again, this is our family standard. We
Mhm.
never allowed sleepovers.
Right.
Just in the world that we're living in today, the risk, the cost and benefit analysis of that, the risk benefit was just not worth it for us.
Yeah.
So we
Mhm.
didn't do that. But if we had our children at another family's home and they said, hey, can your children come over and play a video game with us? We're like, sure. I mean, assuming that it's not something that's, you know,
Mhm.
grotesquely violent or
Yeah.
whatever.
Like
And
Mario Kart or something.
yeah, yeah, something innate, right? We're,
Yeah.
we're we're okay with that, right? Because we're
Okay.
not like, oh, our kids can never have fun.
Mhm.
But it becomes something that then they do as a fun thing at a friend's house, as opposed to 4 hours a day at my house.
Right. Well,
And
that's not gonna lead
so
to addiction.
it
Right.
doesn't lead to
Right.
addiction, right?
Right.
Yeah, we don't want to be the killjoys of like, no, you can't have fun at your friend's house. But
Right.
then with the smartphones and things like that, we have encouraged, particularly our younger children. You have friends who are saying, "Hey, watch this video or come look at this thing on my phone." That you should come and hopefully we're there, and you say, "Hey, ask my parents, can my friend show me this video?" And
Mhm.
then we get to say, "Okay, well, what is it?" And
Mhm.
just because, again, kids show kids inappropriate content on phones
Right.
and things like that. And so
Mhm.
we have also really limited our own children's access to things like smartphones. My kids have said, well, when can I have a smartphone? And I've always told them, you can have a smartphone when you have a job and pay for it.
That's
Mhm.
what we're gonna do. That's exactly right.
And
Yep.
so, we've, for our convenience and for their safety, we've gotten them dumb phones when they're
Yeah.
12, 13 years old. We want to
Sure.
be able to reach them if they're at church at a, Bible quizzing practice or something like that. So we've done that for us to be able to communicate with them. But we've really limited, like, even social media. And again, our family's not the standard. Like, don't say, oh, you got to do what the Waynes do. But like, at 12 years old, we get them an email where they can communicate with family members, with cousins, that kind of thing. And then social media at 16 years old, they can have social media accounts. And what we found is just having some limits. Screens are not allowed in their internet access screens, not allowed in their bedrooms. So they can access internet enabled devices in a public space, the living room, the kitchen, where the family is. We have filters and accountability software on all those devices. I'll say this too: at the end of the day, you can do all the stuff, and if kids really want to sin and they want to get into something, there's usually a workaround, and our kids will always be smarter than us and they'll always find a way. So that's where we also have to have those conversations that are on a heart level, not
Right.
just trying to police and lock down everything. But
Mhm.
we want to have a balance of trying to teach them to make wise decisions from their own heart, ideally, because we're not always going to be able to be there at every moment.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yep, that's also incredibly wise. Israel, you mentioned your book, and I absolutely loved your book, by the way, Raising Them Up. Years ago, I don't know if you remember, but you emailed me the manuscript and asked me to write an endorsement for that book, which I did because it was absolutely fantastic. And I was actually hoping to hold it up during this episode, but when I looked on my bookshelf right before we started recording, I realized that you never sent me a copy once it was in print. And
Well,
I'm
shame
like,
on me.
Terrible.
rude.
Well, for sure. I have to send you a signed copy now.
Yes, you do. That actually, you may have it. I may have given it to somebody because I do give your books to people when parents when they're struggling because I just think they're so fantastic.
Mm.
But yeah, I would love another copy because I definitely don't
Let's
have
do it.
one. All right. But
Let's make sure you
anyway,
get
I
that.
do remember I remember that book so well. It just everything in it was just so incredibly wise and helpful and biblical and practical, and that is just all the boxes that I like to check off for parenting books. And one of the chapters in that book I remember was called How I Taught My Children to Sit Still and Be Quiet. And that really stuck out to me because we get a lot of listeners that send in questions, and that's a biggie. So I'm sure that a lot of our listeners would love to get to know how they can do that, how they can get their littles to learn to sit still and be quiet. So, what did you share in that chapter? What is the secret there? How can parents do that?
Well, obviously, it's hard to put a chapter into a nutshell, but the real secret, and I'll tell you, part of the motivation for that is, like my wife just yesterday, she was at the dentist, took some of our children to the dentist, and she said every single child in the dentist office was on a screen, like no matter what the age, every single one of them, 5 year olds, 7 year olds, because the parent doesn't have any other means to have that child sit in a chair and wait. And she said, our children were the only ones there, not on some kind of an electronic device. And so I didn't want that, right? That's the only way I can ever have my child, if we go to a funeral, that we got to bring their Game Boy or something that
They have to
they
be
play on.
entertained.
Yeah,
Right, right.
exactly. And so So the key is that you have to have times where you sit at home in your living room with your family and you just read to them aloud. So we have done Bible time with our children from the time that they're in the womb. And so this is something that they think is completely normal. And even as infants and toddlers, they have sat on their mama's lap, listen to me read the Bible to them every day. We also read books and stories to our children as well. And that process of calming them and just having them sit for 30 minutes while we do family Bible time equips them and enables them to learn how to control themselves. Now, there is a time where they become toddlers and they can actually start crawling and walking. They get squirmy and they don't want to sit on mama's lap anymore. And so there is that process of mama having to teach them, no, you're going to sit with me, and holding them and, gently restraining them and not just allowing them to fuss and slide down and go crawl across the room and play with whatever they want to play with. So some of those sessions with those 18-month olds and, like kind of 10 to 18 months olds become a lot of focused on teaching the child to sit, and sometimes they can put up a fuss, and that's okay. It's all part of the process. We are not perturbed by that. But for all of my children by age 3, they could sit with us during big people church and sit and listen to a sermon, and they never think that's strange. And so for our family, again, I'm not prescribing this for everyone else's family, but for our family, we like to sit together as a family in church because I want my children to hear the same message that I do, and then we can go home and talk about it afterwards. And so all of our children have always sat with us in big people church through the whole service. We don't send them to the children's church services, and they can do that easily from age 3 on, and they don't think it's strange. They don't know they're not supposed to be able to do that because we're kind of having church every day at home. And so those are things that every parent can do. It's just that it's an investment of time and effort. And so a lot of parents don't want to do that. It's just easier to, give them a screen, give them a device. And unfortunately, though, that doesn't equip a child to be able to have self-restraint, which is, I think, a virtue for a child.
Mm. So, as you can tell from mom talking earlier, she thinks very highly of you and your family. So, obviously, you and Brooke have done a lot of things right. But I'm sure most every parent looks back and wishes that they had maybe done something differently. So, I wanted to ask you, if you could go back in time, what do you wish you could tell your 25-year-old self about parenting?
Yeah, I absolutely know what that would be. I would tell my 25-year-old self, stop having an expectation of trying to raise perfect children.
Mm.
That was my goal. And I think part of that was just that my wife and I were very intent on, we're going to do all this right. We're going to do all the right things. And I was a little bit of a hovering parent, almost looking for my child to do something wrong so I could correct them. And I was just, now as a dad of 11, I know that it's the long game, right? How you win is a long obedience in the right direction, and you just are faithful over the long haul. It's a marathon, not a 100-yard dash. But when it's your first children, you don't know that. And this is one of the difficult things about parenting is you don't know what you're doing. I mean, even parents who kind of have a head start still don't know what they're doing. And this is why I jokingly say we all need to have some sort of a savings account for our first two to pay for their therapy, because
Oh my goodness.
they're gonna need it, right? And
Oh
then we just
no.
apologize to them later. We're like, "Hey, we're so sorry." But then, I think that with the younger ones, I just learned how to relax on the things I needed to relax on.
Mhm.
The downside is, of course, that sometimes older parents can get tired and they can become lazy and then not be as diligent as they should be with the younger ones. And there's always
Right.
that, you let the youngest ones get away with everything. And that can
Mhm.
be a downside too, right? We don't want to do that. But I just think I would have realized that I don't have to make every single infraction be this, big deal, right?
Mhm.
That it's a 2-year-old. Of course they sin.
Mhm.
I don't know why I'm
Shocking.
shocked, right? Of course they're going to sin. They're a 2-year-old and have the long game in mind. And so it's not that I am not concerned about it now, but I just realize, like, we just have to be faithful And if we're faithfully doing the right things over the long period, it's going to bring fruit. I just don't have to panic because, oh no, they did something wrong. Yeah, of course they did. That's why God gave them parents, and that's why we just lovingly correct them. And I just think I would have had a lot less stress about trying to do everything right and create perfect kids. Our kids' great goal is not to grow up and be perfect. Their great goal is to grow up and know how much they need Jesus. And I think I understand that now, and I think I understood it a lot less at 25.
I am currently like 26 weeks pregnant. So with our first baby. So that is just like so encouraging. So
Mhm.
thank you.
I was just thinking that, Alex,
Yeah.
hosting this podcast, you're going to be so much further ahead than all these other mamas. You're
See,
getting all
but
this
there's where
wisdom.
my heart posture comes into play because I'm like, I know all of these things. My kids are going to be so great. And then I hear that and it's humbling and it's
Hmm.
encouraging
Yeah.
to have that in mind.
Yep, that's right.
Now is the part of our show where we give a quick tip for parents. Today's quick tip is courtesy of Israel. What do you have for us today?
Well, I would say this is something that I'm not good at, but the one quick tip that I know from my wife is that you actually have to learn how to have fun with your kids. And I actually have a whole chapter in the Raising Them Up book called Serious Fun,
Hmm.
because I'm kind of the parent who doesn't know how to have fun, and my wife is the parent who's all about having fun. And so I've learned from my wife that sometimes it's just you being with them and doing the thing with them. And even if you're not 100% into it or feeling it, they remember it. And so when you go do the go karts with them, or you go get the ice cream, or you just do the go shoot hoops with them, they remember the moments. And so I think doing the things, and when you have that chance to either do the thing with your kid or to go, not now, I'm busy. I know I'm giving you a serious tip, and that tells you something about
Hmm.
me. Uh, but I think really that's the thing that I still work at. But I think that's something that when you have the chance to say, no, I'm too busy, not now, or just to go do the
Hmm.
thing with your kid
Yep.
as much as possible, try to put down what you're doing and go do the thing.
Mm, I love that because what they're going to remember is not that all the laundry was always folded and put away and that there were never any dirty dishes in the sink. They're going to remember those moments where we took time to say, yeah, this can wait. Let's do something together.
And
So,
my poor mom, because you would try to play like dolls or something with me, and I'd be like, "You're doing it wrong. You can go
yeah,
back
just
to the
you can
kitchen."
go back to the kitchen. I was terrible at playing with my kids. I tried. They would kick
I
me
know.
out.
I was like, "It's cool. It's all right."
I did that once with
Ah,
my girls. My two little girls are like 4 and 2, and they were
yeah.
playing dolls in their dollhouse. And so I thought, I'm gonna come over and play. And so I go over and, who's this? And, oh, that's the mom. And who's this? Oh, that's the daughter. And I'm like, now who is this guy laying out face down in the yard? Oh, that's the dad.
That's funny.
I'm like, I don't know if I like this game.
I'm gonna go
The
back to the
drama we put
dishes.
those dolls through is traumatic. Oh, if you have a quick tip for our show, we'd love to hear from you. It can be any random tip about cooking, housekeeping, something you do with your kids, ideas for fun date nights with your spouse, anything at all. We'd love to share your ideas in the podcast. Just go to gingerhubbard.com to submit those.
I'm excited to take a moment to tell you about the new and expanded edition of Wise Words for Moms, a quick reference guide for parents and teachers. The chart identifies 32 common behavior problems in children, such as disobeying, lying, and complaining, and provides passages of scripture to help parents, teachers, and caregivers address heart issues in richly biblical ways. Imagine the spiritual impact on children if all the people who love them most were teaching the same biblical principles at home, at church, at school, and even at grandma's house. The expanded edition covers even more struggles, such as biting, hitting, bullying, excessive talking, interrupting, procrastination, screaming, and tantrums. And we appreciate you supporting our podcast by ordering directly from my website instead of other online retailers. Just go to gingerhubbard.com to take advantage of our buy three, get a fourth chart free bundle deal of Wise Words for Moms. And be sure to use code parenting at checkout to receive an extra 10% off your order. That's gingerhubbard.com, code parenting. Well, listeners, I hope you guys have been as encouraged as we have today. We are just so grateful for everything you've shared with us today, Israel. So, where is the best place our listeners can go to learn more about you, your books, and all the other resources that you have to offer?
Yeah, so several things. FamilyRenewal.org is our ministry site, familyrenewal.org. If people are interested in having myself or my wife speak at an event, they can go to my name, israelwayne.com. That's my speaker site. And then I'm on all the social media stuff. And then we actually have a new parenting podcast called Raising Them Up.org is the website for that. And so we'd love to have people come listen to that as well.
All right, great. Well, we'll have Heather link to all things Israel and Brooke in the show notes. Israel, how about leaving us with a final word of encouragement?
Yeah, again, I think that issue of remembering that we're in this for the long run and that the goal is really to get their hearts and have relationship with them. And so, picking your battles and not thinking that everything is the end of the world, just keeping this in mind that yes, children are children. Yes, they sin. Yes, they make mistakes. And yes, we're parents who also sin and make mistakes. And so having humility and being willing to repent as parents, I think just keep the relationship the main thing, and love covers a multitude of sins.
Thank you, Mom and Israel, and thank you, listeners, for joining us today. If you enjoy our show and want to help support our ministry, one way you can do that is by following, subscribing, and sharing our podcast with your friends. And if you'd really like to make our day, you can do that by leaving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen. Visit gingerhubbard.com to find Ginger's practical resources that will help you get to the heart of outward behavior and address it from a biblical perspective. Today we're offering her best-selling parenting book, Don't Make Me Count to 3, a mom's look at heart-oriented discipline, as well as the 6-week study guide at a 10% discount. Just use the code parenting at checkout on gingerhubbard.com. Thank you again for joining us today. We can't wait to be with you next week. Until then, may God bless you as you seek to reach the hearts of your children for the glory of God.